European Union Chief Ursula von der Leyen has said Europe must learn to stand alone and continue down a path of independence. She made the remarks in a speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, at a time when relations between the United States and Europe are at an all-time low over President Trump's claim over the Danish territory of Greenland. Let's listen to what Ursula von der Leyen had to say just a few moments ago.
First principle, full solidarity with Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark. The sovereignty and integrity of their territory is non-negotiable. Second, we're working on a massive European investment surge in Greenland. We will work with Greenland and Denmark hand in hand to see how we can further support the local economy and infrastructure. Third, we will work with the United States and all partners on wider Arctic security. This is clearly in our shared interest.
Our Europe business and economic correspondent Marie Sina is in Davos following all the developments there for us. Marie, what have we learned from Ursula von der Leyen's speech there today at Davos?
Well, regarding Greenland, the first point that's clear also in what we just heard is that the EU or von der Leyen is ready to step up Europe's presence in Greenland in terms of investment, but also in terms of security. She stressed that the EU is ready to spend more on security in the Arctic. But there's another clear point that she made, which is tariffs are a mistake. She said that loud and clear in politics and in business. A deal is a deal, is what she said. She referenced the deal on tariffs that the US and the EU made last year, which basically broke because of these tariffs imposed by Donald Trump. And she said that this is not how friends should treat each other. A deal is a deal, using Trump language there to say this is not okay. And she stressed that the ones profiting from these kind of deals breaking are our rivals, are China, are Russia, but aren't the US and the EU.
The World Economic Forum is ostensibly about global business. To what degree is this year's event in Davos being overshadowed by the need for transatlantic crisis diplomacy?
It's certainly being overshadowed to a large degree by the discussion around Greenland. Everybody was watching the von der Leyen speech to see what she says about Greenland. At the same time, the EU, for example, was hoping that the US would, on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos here, sign a Ukraine peace plan, allocate $100 billion to Ukraine to the reconstruction efforts in the country. And fears are that this will not happen because everybody is so focused on the transatlantic relationship. But I think also a strong point to take away from the speech, which wasn't only about Greenland, it was also about European independence, Europe stepping up on the world stage economically through trade, for example. Von der Leyen stressed the Mercosur agreement, which was recently signed between the EU and Latin American countries. She stressed the EU-India deal, which is set to be signed soon. She called it the mother of all deals. And so von der Leyen, with the speech, in a way also managed to bring other topics back to the discussion here in Davos, which are Europe making deals across the world and becoming an independent actor, a different type of actor here on the world stage.
Marie, thank you very much. For now, there's Marie Sina, our Europe business and economic correspondent. Well, President von der Leyen also stressed enduring friendship with America while vowing a united, unflinching and proportional EU response to tariff threats.
We consider the people of the United States not just our allies, but our friends. And plunging us into a downward spiral would only aid the very adversaries we are both so committed to keeping out of the strategic landscape. So our response will be unflinching, united, and proportional.
And our correspondent Terry Schultz in Brussels is also following all these developments, was listening also to Ursula von der Leyen's speech there. Terry, what are your key takeaways from the EU Commission President's speech?
I think you heard the tone there in Ursula von der Leyen's soundbite that we just played there. She wanted to very much let the United States know, the people, the members of Congress, that Europe has not given up this transatlantic relationship. Europe is still very much in favor of cooperating, and that's why she mentioned so many times what a mistake it would be to impose economic measures against Europe at this time. But she also wanted to portray the European Union as a strong player who would respond, as she said, unflinchingly if these worst-case scenarios do play out. Additional tariffs from the U.S. administration, a military invasion of part of an EU member state's territory. So she was walking a fine line between not escalating the rhetoric herself, because many EU member states are still very much afraid to do that, but also not looking like a wimp, basically.
Well, in her speech, Ursula von der Leyen also talked about Arctic security quite a bit. Tell us more about what we've learned there.
That's right. She mentioned that the EU is working on a package on Arctic security. These would follow along, I would guess, the same kind of spending that they've already announced for added security along the eastern flank, adding drone protection. She didn't give many details about what additional measures would be taken there. Of course, we have also seen some of the same member countries in NATO doing the same thing, and for NATO itself to announce that it has enhanced Arctic security. So I think that's a pretty common theme among European countries, especially those who share that Arctic region. But of course, there is no Arctic security if the United States invades Greenland. So that would be a very destabilizing factor. So you really can't get away from that when you're talking about how to improve Arctic security.
Ursula von der Leyen kind of went out of her way to mention some non-EU partners, Canada, the UK, and Norway. All of those, of course, also members of NATO. What do you make of that, Terry, in the context of this tension over Greenland?
Exactly. She talked about the non-U.S. members of NATO. She also mentioned Canada. And this was, again, counterbalanced with her mentioning the trade partners that the EU has that are not the United States. Just a couple of days ago, they signed this enormous trade deal with Mercosur, which, of course, still needs final approval here in Brussels. But she also mentioned India, as Marie mentioned earlier, that would, be an enormous trade deal, again, looking east and not west from the European continent. So this is something that Europe has always known it should do, and which they've said themselves aloud. We need to look for new partners. We need to not be dependent on the United States. Now it very much could be that they do not have a choice, and perhaps they should have moved faster, but they're definitely highlighting that they're going to move now. Inside NATO, when you mentioned those other three countries, the UK and Canada have been very strong on Greenland, on Denmark, saying that we stand with these countries and, obviously do not support any notion of the United States having any right to take over Greenland.
Terry, thank you very much, as always. Our correspondent in Brussels, Terry Schultz.